Tri-City Sports Now, I am Marky Bilson. One other hockey game that went on last night that you should know. This completes the Stanley Cup playoffs. I wanted to give you the late game last night. You may not have known about that. Of course, the Masters are going on. We'll be talking about that here in this segment. Of course, spring football tomorrow. I want to talk a bit about that as we can. I want to suggest to you that a lot of people are picking the Maple Leafs to win a Stanley Cup. I am kind of surprised by that. But then again, when you get play like this against the Boston Bruins, it's self-explanatory. Do that, I'm sorry, the bumper music has not faded. Music out, and now we can go to this.
Hainsey and Zaitsev. And the puck stolen by the Leafs, and Tavares scores! Johnny Toronto makes it 4-1 on an empty net goal, and the Leafs are going to come home with nothing worse than a split.
Well, he's already... that should show you something about how bad it's been for the Toronto Maple Leafs over the years. They haven't won a cup since 67. They win demonstratively against an original six rival in the first round of the playoffs. 4-1. All of English-speaking Canada behind this team. I've told you, you will not find, I don't care if you're talking about the Vols in Knoxville, I don't care if you're talking about the Packers in Green Bay, you will not find a team more well-supported in their home than the Maple Leafs in Toronto. You will not find a team that is more beloved in their city than the Maple Leafs and Toronto have not. And it's amazing because they have not won a Stanley Cup in 52 years. But it's just what the hockey culture is there. It's why I talked about an expansion team for Toronto, two teams in Toronto, just so maybe. And guess what? They win a dancing in the streets, right? Well, it's one playoff victory. Okay, maybe that's a bit much. But they ought to be really feeling good about themselves. What does the announcer say? You want to talk about being fatalist? This is what happens when you don't win a Stanley Cup for 52 years. This is what happens when you have the original six. You start talking, play this again, about, we won the first game, and now come back to Toronto, and it won't be any worse than a split. Listen to this.
And we've got Hainsey and Zaitsev. And the puck stolen by the Leafs, and Tavares scores! Johnny Toronto makes it 4-1 on an empty net goal, and worse than a split.
It's not... He can say he gets the paychecks from the Maple Leafs, I guess. He's the broadcaster, but, that's one of the things. Anyway, by the way, Alex Doherty, talking about the disappointing 3-2 loss to the Stars in the first game back on Wednesday night. And Peter Laviolette said after the game the Preds weren't fast enough, didn't have their legs. Why is that? Could it be that, they had to play the full 82 to win the division? I mean, I don't know. That seems a bit much. You're a professional athlete. You ought to be well, conditioned and all this. Anyway, the Preds were slower in certain places. Alex Doherty of A to Z Sports Nashville, and discuss why. He points out the top line. They allowed, so you don't break it up. Pred's second line was better than you might think. Turns, Granlund, and Smith generated more high-danger chances than they allowed, and they were decent in their transition game. But the third and the fourth lines, and remember, I like the third line with Sissons and Watson on it, but the third line was regulated to the more normal defense first. Is that the role they should have with Colton Sissons on it? So they struggled all night. Bonio, Sissons, Watson, honestly quite bad in allowing shot attempts in their role. Given the zone start disadvantage, I don't know if you can ask for much more than just break even, he says. They didn't break even. They've been excellent for more than a few games, including last year's playoffs. he'll give the third line some time. And this is kind of interesting because you'd be thinking that would be maybe you want to get a little bit of speed or some offensive power. Fourth line, maybe? I mean, come in with four. Admittedly, the checking line is, the checking line. But he thinks it's got to come from the fourth line, the logical switch. So here's what we can look for, according to Doherty, or at least this is what we'd do if he was Peter Laviolette. He says, look, fourth line, and what's a fourth line? It's muckers and grinders, right? But Brian Boyle and Wayne Simmons are big, so he would sit Wayne Simmons, replace him with Robinson's injury in late March, reportedly ready to go whenever needed, and if he's in the lineup, there's your speed. Grimaldi over Simmons? He was the story of the regular season if you watched every Predators game. Brought speed to the forecheck. Therefore, winning those puck battles in the other team's zone. And even could put the puck in the net occasionally. I don't know if I agree with Doherty, because after all, we are talking about a fourth liner, that Grimaldi is the poor man's Victor Arvidsson. A man just scored 34 goals, most in team history. But sometimes, you don't look at the jersey number, they look kind of similar. Could Grimaldi be the difference? I don't know. The one thing here, and I talked about this last year when they pulled Pekka Rinne in the 7th game, and they've sort of made a commitment to Rinne, but he's received a lot of flack. His advanced stats, analytics, goals save against average isn't what you'd think it would be. In fact, of all the goalies in this playoff series, it's the 4th best, or it's the worst. But then that's a far cry from when we were running ads for the Tennessee Lottery on his. By the way, I'm still not sure he's not. After all, GSA, just like in baseball, wins above replacement, or WAR is. And so therefore, I'd rather have something concrete. How many saves you did make? How many doubles you did hit? Regardless, kind of an interesting thing. Going, fourth line, watch that tomorrow at 6 o'clock when it stars Preds. And you know what? You really ought to be watching that and not the orange. Just that the orange and white game is going to be meaningless. Read what the stats are. Otherwise, spring football games are very much unwatchable. They're good to read the box score, but yeah, otherwise, what do you look? Oh, he's got nice arm strength. I didn't know that. That's what you're kind of looking at. But ETSU will also be playing their spring game, as we discussed before. One guy that isn't going to be on the team just yet is, or playing in it, but might wind up as being the starting quarterback, and this, therefore, drama away from the spring football game, is Chance Thrasher. This actually was the beginning of the month here, and he's coming to ETSU as a grad transfer, according to his Twitter profile. He's 6'2", 220 pounds. He's from Sewanee, Georgia. Appeared in 3 games for the Chancelloteers, who are, by the way, FBS. And he carried the ball 5 times for 10 yards, completed both his passes for 17 yards. What do you know about that? You can't get much out of that. He was competing for the but then he had season-ending injury surgery on his throwing arm. 3 rushes his sophomore year, just cup of coffee stats, or in a season, excuse me. He did start against Louisiana Monroe, got hurt the first play. This guy sounds like Jerry Colquitt, if you go back that far with the Vols. Once upon a time, though, he was rated as the 47th best quarterback in the nation out of high school. 247sports.com. He completed in high school 158 of 264 passes for 200. I know you're not going to get this here, but he did have a nice 24-5 touchdown interception ratio in his senior year in high school. And he was at one time the 4th-rated pro-style quarterback out of Georgia, so I'm wondering why he has all those rushing stats. Does the line just stink at Coastal Carolina? Or are they asking him to do something? What I often say, these guys who do have a clue. Trust me on that. Oh, yeah. You know, I've talked about this before. Go back in the archives on my Medium. I mean, you've got guys who used to work as paving contractors saying, okay, this will be a good player. Bob Lichtenfeld, who famously once said he could tell if a player was going to make it in 15 seconds or not. Boy, that's pretty judgmental. He must think he's a really, really good talent evaluator. 15 seconds, really. Randy Sanders didn't know who the best quarterback was on his team after maybe Bob Lichtenfeld should coach ETSU. I don't think. That's what's going on. By the way, in Tennessee, Jim Chaney has reportedly said he wants to give Tennessee a physical style of offense. That seems to me that it would indicate that they would continue to run the ball. And it also seems to indicate to me that Jared Guarantano might be the quarterback, but there's something missing with Jared Guarantano. Sure, the touchdown-interception ratio was real good last year, don't get me wrong. It's not there, and I know it's tough to rack up the passing stats when you're handing it was so consistently behind last year. Why did they have so many more rushes than passes? That doesn't seem to be that much confidence in Guarantano. That doesn't seem to be letting him win a ball game for you, including when the Vols needed him to win a ball game. So intriguing, engaged by how does Guarantano develop? Chaney's been good with some other quarterbacks. Heck, he made Nate Peterman into a guy who could beat the national champion with 5 touchdown passes and outplayed Deshaun Watson. Pitt 43, Clemson 42. I'd like to have had Nate Peterman back in the ACC title game. Their quarterback threw for 8 yards. Then for that matter, they'd like to have Chaney back too. But if you're trying to be a more physical offense, that tells me that you want to run the ball. There's the man there, not Guarantano. Still say the Vols ought to have a winning record. It's time. And the schedule isn't all that good. Or all that tough. But I'm not sure that's a positive sign. I want to be more physical. I want to be more modern. I don't want to go back to the single wing. Tri-City Sports Now, I'm Marky Bilson, right rev speed. Jerry Bonkowski, he's going to join Mace in Richmond. They're qualifying today. That's kind of interesting. I haven't even touched on that yet. Tri-City Sports Now will return after this.
20 WEMB